On tonight's summary of the Israel-Hamas War, day 159, negotiators report to Israel that, quote, there has been movement in Hamas's position. The sides are hoping to restart hostage negotiations in the coming days. Muhammad Abu Hassanah, one of the seniors in Hamas's operations division, was assassinated in an airstrike today in Rafah. IDF spokesperson Daniel Hagari stated that Israel will flood the Gaza Strip with aid as 4 U.S. ships reportedly set sail towards the Mediterranean to establish a pier in the Gaza Strip. Secret negotiations reported between the United States and Iran, stating that these have gone on already for several months, trying to de-escalate the region and rein in the Houthi attacks. As part of the attempts to establish a unified Palestinian government for the day after in the Gaza Strip, Palestinian Authority Chairman Mahmoud Abbas is expected to appoint Mohammed Mustafa as the Palestinian Prime Minister. According to reports, this may even happen tomorrow. Hello everyone, I'm Alon Burstein, visiting assistant professor in the Department of Political Science and Israel Institute Fellow at the University of California, Irvine, here to bring you the summary of the last 24 hours of the Israel-Hamas War. It is currently the evening of March 13th, 2024 in the United States, the morning of March 14th, 2024 in the Middle East. Starting with the hostage situation, the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken was asked at a press conference today about the hostage negotiations, and he referred to the new U.S. proposal that has been rumored in the last several days. He stated that a strong proposal is on the table, but the question remains whether or not Hamas will take it. No information was given regarding if this is the rumored 2 to 4 day truce that the CIA Director William Barnes has been trying to convince both sides to at least undertake in order to restart negotiations, or if there is a larger package deal to completely revamp negotiations that is being offered. In addition to this, according to reports in Israel, the country received messages from the different negotiators that there has been movement on Hamas's side with regards to the negotiations, including more involvement of Hamas's internal leadership in the Gaza Strip. A senior Israeli official raised the possibility that if in fact Marwan Issa, this is number 3 in Hamas's internal leadership, was successfully assassinated several days ago, this may have put pressure on the Hamas leadership in the Strip to move towards a deal. Right now there's still no confirmation if that assassination attempt of Marwan Issa was successful. Moving on to the Gaza Strip, there were no rockets or mortars fired from the Gaza Strip towards Israel in the last 24 hours. In the northern parts of the Gaza Strip, intensive bombing was reported again in the areas of Zaytun and Jabalia refugee camp. There were no reports given regarding what the targets of these bombings were. There is ongoing fighting in different parts of the north, however, no major ground invasion. At the moment, these airstrikes are reportedly due to intelligence information. Other news, an unusual report was circulated today. The IDF stated that from the Israeli side of the Gaza border, 2 divers were seen in the sea approaching the no-go zone. According to reports, the 2 divers were approaching with diving equipment. The IDF fired warning shots in their vicinity and they withdrew back away from the zone. There were no reports regarding if these were Israelis, if they were Jews or Arabs, and what their intent may have been. We may find out more about this later on. In the central parts of the Gaza Strip, there was ongoing fighting reported, although again, not reported specifically where. Most of the fighting is happening in the outskirts of the El Nusrat refugee camp and the El Bureid refugee camps, so it is very likely that that is where the fighting is located. But right now, all that's being reported is intensive gun battles. The bulk of the fighting remains in the southern parts of the Gaza Strip. In Khan Yunis, there's ongoing fighting in the Hamid City region. This is in the western parts of the city. Intensive gun battles were reported throughout the day, including an IDF raid against a residential area where 15 Hamas operatives were reportedly held up. The IDF raided the area after intelligence from previously arrested Hamas operatives led them to this hideout, and the complex was destroyed. The IDF also reported arresting a commander in the Nuhba force during a raid in Hamid City. In addition to this, there was ongoing fighting that was reported in the Abasan region and in Al-Qarara. Both of these are on the eastern side of Khan Yunis, the Abasan region on the east, and Al-Qarara on the northeastern parts, closer to the border with Israel. In addition to all this, footage circulated today of a car on fire in Khan Yunis, which according to local sources was targeted by an airstrike from the sky. This fits the profile of a targeted assassination. However, there was no information given about who was in this car, if this assassination was successful, and who was attempting to target. Again, we may find out more about this in the coming days. In Rafah, Muhammad Abu Hassanah, who is one of the seniors in Hamas's operations division, was assassinated today. Abu Hassan is one of the main links between the movement's leadership and field operatives of Hamas. He was also the person in charge of operating an intelligence headquarters regarding IDF movement in the Gaza Strip. And importantly, it was also reported that he is one of the operatives in Rafah who was in charge of organizing raids against humanitarian aid convoys and delivering this aid to Hamas. The IDF reported that his assassination was a joint operation of the IDF Air Force and the Shabak. In addition to this, local sources in Rafah stated that a bombing was carried out in the Rafah region in an area that was destined for the distribution of humanitarian aid by UNRWA. 5 Palestinians were reported killed and dozens injured. There was no confirmation given about where this happened specifically in Rafah, and the IDF did not report about this attack. Other news related to the Gaza Strip. The IDF spokesperson Daniel Hagari supplied more information today about the IDF's intended plans for evacuating Palestinian civilians from Rafah leading up to an invasion. In a press conference, he stated that humanitarian islands, i.e. designated pockets within the Gaza Strip that will be defined as humanitarian zones, and in these areas, temporary housing, i.e. refugee camps, field hospitals, food and water facilities will be established, and Palestinian internally displaced people will be evacuated to those areas. He did not state when the operation would begin, but emphasized that Israel intends to coordinate it with international actors, chief among them Egypt. What we learn from this is that the IDF is not planning on having a mass evacuation of people to Han Yunis, or possibly to the northern parts of the Gaza Strip, but rather to disperse the people across several different regions within the Gaza Strip. We also learn from this that the IDF is planning to actually try to prepare these destined humanitarian islands, rather than carrying out the evacuation the way previous evacuations were carried out, simply diverting people to areas and leaving it up to aid agencies to manage them in those areas. Amidst this, the Politico News Network reported today that senior officials in the United States informed Israel that the U.S. administration will support a Rafah invasion if the IDF focuses on, quote, high-value Hamas targets and avoids a full-scale invasion of the region. They added that such a full-scale invasion may cause a serious fracture in the relationship between Israel and the United States. Amidst this, Israel's defense minister, Yoav Gallant, also spoke to soldiers in the Gaza Strip today. Implying continued operations in Rafah, he stated that anyone who thinks that the IDF is being held up will soon learn that our military reaches anywhere and everywhere at once. Regarding casualties, no IDF soldiers reported killed or injured in the Gaza Strip in the last 24 hours, leaving the total number of IDF soldiers killed since the invasion began on 249, and the number of IDF soldiers injured since the invasion began on 1,475. The Palestinian Health Ministry in the Gaza Strip is reporting that 88 Palestinians were killed in the last 24 hours, bringing the total number of Palestinians killed in the Gaza Strip since the war began to 31,272. 73,024 Palestinians reported injured in the Gaza Strip, and there are still many Palestinians that are buried under the rubble and presumed dead. Moving on to the humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip. So U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken stated today that there has been positive movement with regards to the entrance of aid into Gaza, however that it's not enough, and he added that Israel must do more to open land crossings and for the entrance of aid and ease restrictions on what aid is allowed in. He stated that maritime corridor is not a substitute for land crossings, which remain the most critical way and most efficient way to allow aid to enter the Gaza Strip. Amidst this, the IDF spokesperson Daniel Hagari related to the humanitarian crisis in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip. Using language that U.S. officials used recently, he stated that Israel plans on flooding the area with humanitarian aid, adding that it will enter from several different locations. So, one of the things that was stated several days ago by different U.S. officials is, in light of the looting, if Israel would allow the area to be flooded with humanitarian aid, the humanitarian aid would not be as sparse. There would therefore be less looting, and it could actually get to civilians. Now the IDF spokesperson is using this same rhetoric. Seemingly, this is part of the growing plans that we have heard about the IDF trying to get humanitarian aid agencies to use roads that it has paved, opening the different maritime corridors, developing these piers, working with the World Central Kitchen. All this is meant, according to at least what Daniel Hagari is saying, to begin flooding the area with aid in order to change the balance of how much aid is worth and maybe stop it from being looted. Other news, Germany announced today that it is going to join the aid paradropping missions in the Gaza Strip, sending 2 Hercules planes, each of which can carry up to 18 tons of cargo. The report stated that Germany may join the aid missions already in the coming weekend. Meanwhile, the United Kingdom reported that it canceled the paradropping mission in the Gaza Strip in the last 24 hours out of concern for causing civilian casualties. Amidst this, the U.S. Central Command reported that in today's paradropping mission, which is the 9th that the U.S. has carried out since these missions began, over 35,000 meals were paradropped into the Gaza Strip, as well as 28,000 bottles of water. Relating to this, it was reported today that one of the containers of humanitarian aid dropping, the GPS navigation failed and washed out to sea and ended up landing close to the Tel Aviv coast. Other news, the EU Foreign Minister, Joseph Borrell, spoke at the UN Security Council today. He stated that the need for paradropping aid in maritime corridors are because of the natural ways of supplying aid, that is, roads, are artificially blocked, adding that starvation has become a weaponized tactic that is being used in the war. He stated that just as it is condemned in Ukraine, the same words must be used in the Gaza Strip, adding, this is not a natural disaster, not a flood, not an earthquake, it is man-made. So Joseph Borrell has been very critical of the way Israel is handling the humanitarian aid situation since the war began, however, stating that starvation is being used as a weapon in the war is his harshest criticism so far. Other news, the U.S. Central Command reported that 4 ships have departed the United States on their way to the Middle East, and they are going to begin establishing the temporary pier that the U.S. intends on developing in order to really develop a much more serious maritime corridor for the entrance of humanitarian aid. Moving on to the West Bank, there was a Palestinian attack that was carried out at the tunnel checkpoint that is one of the crossings from the West Bank into Jerusalem. A 15-year-old Palestinian arrived at the checkpoint on an electric bicycle and reportedly stabbed a security guard and a soldier several times. The 2 were injured and the attacker was shot and killed. Some reports stated that the attacker, Mustafa Talib al-Wadhana, was 17 and not 15. Regarding IDF activity in the West Bank, substantial IDF raid was carried out in the Jenin refugee camp in the last 24 hours. The IDF reportedly located 60 explosive devices and roadside bombs, and heavy gun battles were also reported in the refugee camp. 2 Palestinians were reported killed. The IDF reported that 1 armed Palestinian was killed, so possibly the other one was a bystander. 4 Palestinians were reported injured as well. In addition to this, other IDF activity was also reported in Kilkilia, the areas of Idhana and Yatar, that is near Hebron, the village of Luban Sharkiya near Nablus, and El Khadir near Bethlehem. The Wafa news agency also reported that among those arrested today are Muhammad Rabieh, who is the spokesperson for Fatah movement in Jerusalem. Other news, on the 4th night of Ramadan, some 40,000 people prayed in Al-Aqsa Mosque. Thus far, the prayers have gone relatively peacefully. However, all eyes are centered towards Friday that is coming up. The first Friday and last Friday of Ramadan are particularly holy days, and they are also days that historically there's a lot of intensified fighting in the area. Presumably this year, things are much more tense. All eyes are looking at this upcoming Friday. Amidst this, Hamas put out an announcement today stating, and I quote, "We call upon Palestinian people in the West Bank to march en masse to the Al-Aqsa Mosque to break the occupation's restrictions, to seek to collide with the occupation forces, and support the Palestinian people's struggle in Gaza." So we're seeing that Hamas is also trying to capitalize on Ramadan and incite the people, again, like leading up to this Friday. Other news, in a purely political show, Israel's Minister of National Security Itamar Ben-Gvir arrived at the Israeli police's internal affairs unit, protesting the fact that the police officer who shot and killed a 12-year-old Palestinian who was firing fireworks yesterday has been summoned to the unit. I say this is purely a political show because the Internal Affairs Division has not even opened an investigation of the police officer. He was simply summoned in order to give his report about what happened. Ben-Gvir stated in turn that the police officer is a hero, and he is going to make sure that that officer is given an accommodation for his activities. Moving on to the northern parts of Israel, southern parts of Lebanon. After the substantial escalations of the last several days, and yesterday was the most intensive fighting day between the sides in this front since the war began, today there was a return to quote-unquote regular firing between the sides. Rockets and missiles were sent from Lebanon targeting the areas of the Upper Galilee. These included the areas of Yesod HaMa'ala, Hulta, Ramot Naftali. There were also rockets sent towards the Hula Valley and Hania in the Western Galilee. Several border incidents were also reported throughout the day. Regarding IDF activity, IDF warplanes attacked a Hezbollah structure in the Kanatra region, and Hezbollah military infrastructure was also attacked in the Yatar area. Earlier in the day, attacks were reported against launching sites and Hezbollah structures in the areas of Ita Sha'ab. There was also an attack against a Hezbollah structure reported in the areas of Misr Jabal, and artillery fire in the Wadi Hamul region as well. Al-Miyadan also reported that the IDF carried out attacks in Yarin. In addition to all these, Hadi Ali Mustafa, who is a senior Hamas official and the person in charge of coordinating the movement's field activities in Lebanon, was assassinated today. Hamas announced his death, stating that he was a logistics officer in the Al-Qassam brigades. In addition to that, Hamas radio went even further and stated that he was one of the leaders of the Al-Qassam brigades in Lebanon. The IDF stated that warplanes fired missiles at his car near the area of Tzor, stating that he was also a prominent figure in the movement's construction units in charge of tunnels and base development. 2 people were passing by his car when it was attacked on a motorbike. One of them was killed and another one was also injured. In addition to this, the Lebanese Foreign Minister, Abdallah Bo Habib, announced today that Lebanon is going to submit to the UN Security Council an official complaint about Israel's recent attacks in the Baalbek regions and in the Bekaa Valley area, stating that they were attacks targeting civilians. Other news, Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah, gave a speech today. He stated, among others, that the war between the sides has been going on since 1948, and that Gaza's resistance and holding out this far is a miracle. He added the fact that 6 months into the war, after Israel launched its campaign stating it was going to destroy Hamas, it is now negotiating with the group and with the negotiators that the group has picked, showing Israel's weakness. He stated that Gaza has taught a lesson to the world and addressed Prime Minister Netanyahu personally, stating, he says that if he does not enter Rafah, he will lose the war. We say to Netanyahu, even if you invade Rafah, you will lose the war. He added that the Lebanese front adheres to the decisions made in Gaza, seemingly referencing the idea that if there is a truce or a ceasefire, this will apply to Hezbollah as well, and if there are in turn escalations, this will apply to Hezbollah in Lebanon as well. Moving on to some of the regional developments, Financial Times reported today that the United States has been holding secret meetings with Iran since the beginning of 2024, trying to convince Iran to restrain the Houthis from their attack and to de-escalate the region. The report, citing both U.S. and Iranian officials, stated that the talks have been taking place in the areas of Oman, and stated that the U.S. Special Envoy to the Middle East, Brett McGurk, and Iranian Deputy Foreign Minister Ali Bagheri Khani have been negotiating during these meetings. The report also adds that Iran's nuclear program was also discussed in these meetings. Other news, Greece reported today that one of its ships fired on 2 Houthi drones in the Red Sea, forcing them to divert. The U.S. Central Command reported in turn that the Houthis fired a nautical ballistic missile towards a U.S. ship and that it missed, and that the U.S. destroyed 2 Houthi drones throughout the day. Moving on to some of the political and general trends for the last 24 hours. There's ongoing political turmoil in Israel, which is likely to have a big impact on the way the war is being run. Minister Gantz today voiced his disapproval of allowing Gideon Sa'ar, who is a prominent politician who split from his party yesterday, from joining the war cabinet. Prime Minister Netanyahu is seemingly going to try to resolve the disagreements. However, if Gideon Sa'ar is allowed to join, this may open the door for the inclusion of other ministers, such as Itamar Ben-Gvir, who already demanded that if Sa'ar joins the war cabinet, he is going to demand to join as well. This in turn is going to basically defeat the purpose of the war cabinet. The entire purpose was to remove it from the main cabinet of Israel's government that is dominated by hawkish extremist elements like Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich. So if this does happen, likely we will see Benny Gantz leaving the war cabinet and the way the war is run is going to be changed. Or if this does not happen, Gideon Sa'ar may in turn leave the government, also impacting the way the war is run. Other news, the Prime Minister of Holland, Mark Rutte, is visiting Jerusalem, and he met with Prime Minister Netanyahu today. Netanyahu reportedly conveyed to him Israel's determination to invade Rafah, and stated that the recognition of a Palestinian state would be seen as a Hamas achievement at this time. He also added that Israel is determined to replace UNRWA, and thanked Rutte for suspending the funding to the organization. He called upon Holland to join the maritime corridor that is being developed in Gaza as well. In addition to this, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz is due to visit Israel on Sunday. This will be the second time that he visits Israel since the war began. Other news, after 3 Palestinians were arrested in Italy several days ago on charges of planning terror attacks against foreign military and civilians, likely against Israel, an Italian court today rejected Israel's extradition request of one of the Palestinians, Anan Yaish. According to the ruling, there is concern in Italy that his extradition will render him being subject to cruel and inhumane treatment, humiliation, and other violations of human rights. Other news, South Africa's Foreign Minister, Naledi Pandor, announced today that people with South African citizenship who are serving in the IDF are going to be subject to arrest when they return to South Africa. Moving on to the future of the Gaza Strip, after the different Palestinian factions met under Russian auspices and tried to come up with some version of a unity technocratic government that will govern the West Bank and the Gaza Strip together in the day after the war, reports are now circulating that Palestinian Authority Chairman Mahmoud Abbas is going to name Mohammed Mustafa as the new Palestinian Prime Minister for this government. According to reports, this government is going to be a technocratic government, going to govern both the West Bank and the Gaza Strip after the war. Mustafa is a Fatah member, and in the past he has served as the economy minister and deputy prime minister of the Palestinian Authority. He is also currently the head of the Palestinian Investment Fund. He's known to have a vast array of business ties both within this region as well as internationally. Noteworthy, however, it's important to add that if this in fact does happen tomorrow, this is being done without consultation with Hamas and the other Palestinian factions, and thus the future of this government as being a unity government is very much in doubt. What we saw is, several weeks ago, Hamas announced that it is willing to join in some sort of unity government. This is the first time that Hamas has been willing to do this, not saying that it demands that it will be the dominant force and lead the government. Then these negotiations happened. The PLO, under Mahmoud Abbas, put forth that they're going to be interested in Muhammad Mustafa. Hamas did not put forth who they are interested in running the government. It is possible that Hamas is actually not interested in being at the forefront of the government at this point in order to allow it to have more international legitimacy. However, it remains to be seen how much this government can actually bring all the factions under its auspices and control and govern the Gaza Strip in the future. If you enjoy these reports, please do remember to subscribe, give them a like, turn on notifications if you want to know when reports come out. If you have questions or comments, leave them in the comment section below. If you'd like me to put out special videos focusing on specific things, please leave that in the comment section as well. That is my report for the last 24 hours. I'll be back tomorrow.